Election Day is done, but the race for Texas Attorney General is not over yet.
Clearly to the establishment, they got what they wanted. They got me in a runoff.
Texas Democrats and Republicans need to head back to the polls. We dig deeper into the battle to decide who gets on the November ballot. A Texas congressman faces a fight to keep his job against a woman who once worked as his intern. Why the battle among Democrats could boost Republican hopes in South Texas. Election day problems slowed the vote count in the state's largest county. What went wrong and why it could matter for other elections in Texas.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us on State of Texas. I'm Monica Madden in for Josh Hinkle. Voters will have to go back to the polls in May to decide who will be on the November ballot in the race for Attorney General. Not a single Republican or Democratic candidate got more than 50% of the vote on Tuesday. Republican incumbent Ken Paxton fell short of that threshold needed to avoid a runoff. George P. Bush led the challengers, beating out former Texas Supreme Court Justice Eva Guzman and East Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert. Democrats also have a runoff. Civil rights attorney Rochelle Garza led the way, and it's been a tight race to determine who she'll face in the runoff. Former Galveston mayor and trial lawyer Joe Jaworski was just barely ahead of civil rights attorney Lee Merritt, with all polling locations reporting. The results are not official yet, and we may not know the outcome until the March 10th deadline for canvassing votes. But we do know there will be runoffs. Maggie Glenn breaks down the battles for both Republicans and Democrats.
In the race for second place, Democrat Joe Jaworski says he's got it, with all polling locations reporting Thursday morning.
During my second cup of coffee, indeed.
He says he's headed to battle Rochelle Garza in the runoff, edging out Lee Merritt by just 1/10 of a percentage point, although that count isn't official until the canvass.
There's about a 1,400 vote difference between me and Mr. Merritt.
Garza says she's not worried about who comes in second.
We pulled in over 400,000 votes, more than double the next two opponents. It is a clear indication that Texans are ready to see a woman in this position, a Latina.
Mike Fields, the fourth place finisher, calling for Jaworski and Merritt to step down, but Jaworski says he's not giving up.
Think about every team who enters the fourth quarter down by 20 points. I mean, do we ask the quarterback, look, hand the ball over, man, it's over? No, we don't. This is Texas politics.
The battle also heating up in the Republican runoff. Incumbent Ken Paxton addressing George P. Bush's win.
Clearly to the establishment, they got what they wanted. They got me in a runoff.
Bush slamming back.
Well, Ken Paxton's all about the labels, right? As an indicted felon, he's going to do what he can to stay out of jail. In fact, most white-collar criminal defense lawyers will say the best way to stay out of jail as a politician is to keep winning races.
All candidates ready to battle until Election Day in May.
It's 83 days and counting, and it's going to be one wild ride. So everybody buckle up and let's go.
Maggie Glenn for State of Texas.
We want to take a deeper dive into this race and other key developments from the primary. For insight, we're joined by two veteran Texas political reporters, John Moritz, Capitol correspondent for the USA Today Network, and Jeremy Wallace, state politics reporter for the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News. Welcome, guys. John, I'm going to start with you for this first question. I mean, as we heard from Maggie's story, we're really already seeing that battle now play out between George P. Bush and Ken Paxton, who are already going head-to-head. Talk a little bit more about what we can expect to see in the coming months between them two as we get to the runoff.
I think we're going to see some pretty good bare-knuckle politics in that race. I mean, obviously, Bush is not only fighting for his political life, he's also got his family's legacy on the line with him. Paxton is a survivor, and he has done well with the Republican base so far, regardless of the baggage that he brings in. So this is not going to be a gentleman's game between now and the runoff.
And, you know, speaking to the indictment aspect and all of the legal troubles that have been, plaguing Ken Paxton in his time, that's something that all of the AG candidates were going after for Ken Paxton, but, it doesn't seem to have that much of an impact. Do you think that's going to be a winning argument for Bush, Jeremy?
Well, it's going to be a difficult argument. Normally, it would be a good argument to be made, but like Bush clearly, was using that throughout the campaign. But you saw in some of the counties, like Paxton, got over 50% of the vote, and particularly in Bush country. And I'm talking places like Midland and Harris County, where the Bush name still is very strong. Bush really underperformed in those areas, so he's got a lot of work to do. So he's going to have to really pull out the hammers and go after Paxton and bring him down if he's going to have a shot at winning this runoff.
Now, turnout for the primary itself, it was a little shy of 3 million voters. I mean, you take that into consideration of the entire Texas state and registered voters, it's pretty low. Runoffs are even lower. So, I mean, what kind of voters would show up to a runoff election, and which candidate could this favor?
The committed voters show up. Those people who really enjoy politics. Think it's their civic duty to understand the game and to be a participant. Those people tend to be on the left or right, Democrat or Republican, at the base. So the conservatives in the Republican Party, the arch conservatives, are more likely to decide the race, just like the liberal voters in the Democratic Party will likely decide their runoff as well.
I want to turn now to the governor's race. Now, we didn't have necessarily the most competitive primaries. Early polling suggested that, incumbent Governor Greg Abbott, he was going to do well, and same thing with Beto O'Rourke on the Democratic side. I mean, he just, totally wiped that through the park. But Jeremy, I want to talk to you because you were in Corpus Christi on the night of the governor's remarks. Did you think anything was interesting the way I noticed he did not name Beto O'Rourke once by name during his speech?
Yeah, I think he really kind of laid out where we're going with this election. It's like we've heard this phrase over and over again, it's the economy, stupid, right? It's like that is what you heard from Abbott on that stage. He was talking about how many jobs there were. And where was he talking about that? He was talking about that in South Texas, where he wants to make some inroads, and warn the people in the oil and gas industry that somehow voting for Beto would be a danger for them. So if they're on that fence, stick with the guy who's giving you a good, jobs and, good economy. That usually works for incumbents. Incumbents in a good economy are hard to beat. So Beto O'Rourke's got to find some way to break that up, when, Greg Abbott is talking about how many jobs he's brought to the state of Texas.
Yeah, I kind of want to expand on that point of both of their backdrops. I think some reporters might have assumed, it's the governor. He'll be in Austin, the state capital. He chose Corpus Christi, kind of part of that greater South Texas area. And Beto O'Rourke was in Tarrant County, which is traditionally red. What does that say?
Well, both of them are trying to expand their party's base. This is going to be an interesting governor's race in the fact that we have two well-known quantities on each one. Usually there's somebody we're just getting to know. We've known Beto O'Rourke for now 4 years coming up on. We've known Greg Abbott since 2002, or even longer as a statewide office holder. And it's also clear that Abbott is salivating at the opportunity to run against Beto. His campaign basically laid it all out the day afterwards. They're excited. They've already got their messages, and they've been telegraphing it all year. Beto's too liberal. He's bad on guns and the border. That's the mantra, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Well, and look how swingy those two areas are. Corpus Christi has a little bit of a swing towards it. Democrats do pretty well in the city, but the Republicans have hope. They've been actually making some inroads there. And then also in Tarrant County, it's been a red county for so long, but Democrats have started to pick off some spots. So you can see both of them, again, looking ahead to the general election, they're very different electorate. They both got to figure out a way to pull people over who are in those swingy territories that have to be on their side if they're going to win this thing.
It'll definitely be interesting to watch. All right, John Moritz and Jeremy Wallace, thank you for joining us for this. We'll bring you back later in the show for more post-primary analysis.
Problems on Election Day lead to legal action in the state's largest county. What went wrong and why it could matter for other elections in Texas. A progressive push could bring a big change in South Texas politics, the race that has a longtime representative fighting to keep his seat in Washington. A Texas congressman will lose his spot on Capitol Hill, but not because of the election, the affair that's shaking up the political landscape.